Welcome to the Explainer, everyone. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into ancient cosmology. We'll be digging into ancient texts that weave together this incredible narrative, one that actually spans from eternity past all the way to concepts that mirror modern quantum physics.
That's right, it's a massive scope for sure, but by examining the source material directly, we're going to unpack exactly how these ancient writers understood the very architecture of existence. We're exploring a framework that attempts to explain the origin of time, a completely lost angelic age, the physical structure of the cosmos, and the ultimate nature of the creator itself.
So, here's our agenda for today. First, the uncreated I am. Second, purpose of angelic hosts. Third, ruin and the gap. Fourth, architecture of the great land. And number 5, divine attributes in science.
Now, these are dense, deeply interconnected concepts, but keeping this roadmap in mind is going to help guide us as we navigate through all this material.
All right, section 1, the uncreated I am, existing outside of time. Let's just dive right into the absolute foundation of this worldview, which is a creator with zero origin story. In the text, the creator isn't described as something that became, but simply as the one who just is. You know, what's truly wild here is the grammar itself. I am that I am. It's a present tense declaration. The source heavily emphasizes a being who is just eternally now. Think of it like an author who writes a book. That author exists entirely outside the pages of the story and can see the beginning, the middle, and the end all at the exact same time. That is exactly how the text frames the creator's relationship to reality. Spot on. It really illustrates that God isn't just some being situated inside the universe. Rather, the creator is the literal ground of all existence. According to the text, without this uncreated source, nothing else could even remain. Not matter, not space, not even the concept of existence itself. Literally everything is suspended on this everlasting foundation. Which brings us to how time itself is defined in this framework. Time is presented as a created structure, something designed specifically for the inhabitants of the universe. It's definitely not a container that somehow holds the creator.
Right. So the absolutely crucial point here is that asking how long the original creation took actually imposes our own human creaturely limitations on an infinite maker. The text argues that the creator simply spoke things into existence without needing any measurable duration of time to pull it off.
Moving right along to section 2, purpose of angelic hosts, the first family. So, before the physical earth was completely formed, the texts tell us there were already created beings hanging around, the angelic hosts. They weren't just some afterthought, they were actually considered the very first family. Just listen to this beautiful scripture from Job. It points out something pretty incredible. These sons of God, meaning the angelic hosts, actually witnessed the laying of the earth's physical foundations. They were already there, literally singing in exuberant holy love as they watched the architecture of the cosmos being built. And they were created with very specific core purposes: fellowship, worship, governance over creation, and eventually ministering to humanity.
Importantly, though, the texts make a huge point to note that these beings were granted genuine free will. Why? Well, from a theological perspective, true love and true worship just cannot be forced. It has to be freely chosen. And that, as we'll see, sets the stage for a massive cosmic conflict.
Which leads us to section 3, ruin and the gap theory, the ancient catastrophe. That epic conflict takes us directly into a really critical theological interpretation known as the gap theory. This proposes a vast, completely immeasurable pause between the very first 2 verses of the book of Genesis. Notice the stark textual contrast here. Genesis 1:1 describes an absolute origin, perfect, complete, and ordered. But immediately, like in the very next breath in Genesis 1:2, the condition shifts dramatically to darkness, chaos, and a void state. So the big theological question the source raises is, what on earth caused such a drastic and devastating change? Well, the answer lies in the ancient Hebrew phrase Tohu Bohu, which means without form and void. Linking this back to the prophet Isaiah, the text explicitly points out that God did not create the earth in vain, using that exact same Hebrew word tohu. Therefore, the earth wasn't originally made chaotic, it became ruined. A massive catastrophic event of judgment must have happened right there in the gap between verses 1 and 2. So, if we map the timeline out, it unfolds like this. First, you have a perfect angelic creation. Second, the tragedy of Lucifer's prideful rebellion. Third, the resulting judgment which caused the ruin of the first heaven and earth. And there's your gap. And finally, the necessary 6-day restoration process that essentially prepares the world for mankind. And this sovereign timeline plays out across 3 very distinct architectural phases.
Exactly. The first world was for the angelic host, but as we discussed, it was ultimately ruined. The second world is the restored, redemptive architecture designed specifically for mankind, which the text considers temporary. It's currently passing away. And finally, the third world is the prophesied new heaven and earth, which is an eternal, incorruptible architecture.
Okay, Section 4, Architecture of the Great Land, the Restored Earth. Speaking of architecture, let's transition over to the physical design of this restored Earth. The source materials strictly outlines an ancient cosmological blueprint that differs sharply from the models we use today. Right, because in strict contrast to a modern globe spinning around in the vacuum of space, this specific ancient architecture features an absolutely stationary structure set upon immovable foundations. In this worldview, any concept of a moving Earth is just firmly rejected in favor of a fixed, firmly grounded reality. And right above the stationary foundation is the trachea. The text describes this firmament as a solid, tent-like vaulted dome stretched overhead. It was under this grand protective vault that the 6 literal days of forming and filling the Earth actually took place, keeping the cosmic waters safely separated above and below. Now, when the restoration began in the darkness of Genesis 1:2, the text says the Spirit moved upon the waters. The Hebrew word used there is rakaf. It means hovering or brooding tenderly, honestly, exactly like a mother eagle warming her nest. It really frames the restoration of the ruined deep as this incredibly intimate act of divine grace, just warming it right back into life. It really is a beautiful image, isn't it? This specific, domed, stationary architecture wasn't just some cold engineering project. It was intentionally crafted as a safe, protective home. It was born from pure, overflowing love and a deep desire for relationship with humanity long before a single person even drew a breath. All right, Section 5, Divine Attributes in Science, Fingerprints of the Maker. For our final topic today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating bridge. The source examines how these ancient descriptions of the Creator's attributes actually parallel modern scientific discoveries. They call these the fingerprints of the Maker. Can the infinite nature of the I Am be observed in the laws of physics and biology? Well, to answer that, let's try a quick thought experiment. Imagine an ultimate supercomputer that flawlessly contains all information, powers the whole system, and operates everywhere at once. But even that, the text notes, totally falls short of an uncreated mind. So let's map these 3 divine attributes onto what we actually know today. Omniscience, or all-knowingness, is mirrored in the staggering complexity of coded DNA information. Omnipresence is reflected in quantum entanglement. And omnipotence, limitless power, is perfectly illustrated by Einstein's E = mc squared, showing the sheer raw energy condensed within matter itself. Let's zero in on quantum entanglement for a second, or non-locality. Modern science shows that entangled particles affect each other instantly across any distance, with absolutely 0 time delay. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance.
Right, and the text argues this spooky, non-local reality actually perfectly mirrors divine omnipresence. It's essentially a physical illustration of a creator who isn't just spread out across space, but is fully and instantly aware of every single atom simultaneously. No delay.
So the real argument here is that scientists aren't actually inventing laws, like thermodynamics, gravity, or quantum mechanics. Instead, they're merely uncovering the mathematical rules and systems that were meticulously established by an infinite mind long before time even began. While we've covered a lot of ground today, we've explored the uncreated I Am, the tragedy of the gap, the architecture of the great land, and even the echoes of divinity in quantum science. So, we're going to leave you with this to ponder. If the universe truly is a purposeful architectural masterpiece, what does that reveal about the ultimate uncreated mind that imagined you?
Such a great question to end on. Thank you all so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.